Okay, so hi everyone. As you can see, I'm not veteran. He and we are different persons actually. So, veteran, how are you? We're recording this right after the G2 Mad Lions KOI game.
Yeah.
So, how are you? How you see the game? Tell me.
I'm good. Game. I don't want to say it was disappointing. Like, I didn't expect Mad Lions KOI to win. The manner in which they lost, I'm really glad in the second game they had a lot of fighting spirit there. There was a big point where they turned around the game in a huge way, off of some individual stuff, but then you could see the brain thing coming in. So I'm happy about that. Overall, today's games are really, really fast, though.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about Heretics than I am about Mad Lions KOI. But I guess we'll get into that.
I saw a tweet that you posted, I don't know if it was in winter, about Mad Lions KOI style more in like global ultimates, right?
Oh, Frescoey, that would have been me isolating Frescoey. Because when I think about Frescoey, historically speaking, I've always thought about him more as like a globals player. At least that's when he was at his best. So like his Galio, his TF even, back in 2021, those were the really defining features of them. He played super heavily to lean to whatever the strong side was, whatever the jungle side was, whatever the side they're playing around was with those champs, and outputted so much pressure on the map. No one else was really doing that at the time. It was like a version of what FPX kind of got with Doinby. But he didn't need jungle support to get him out the lane first. Like he did that himself as well. He cheat waves to get out the lane. He was very, very good. Sometimes he would just start the plays on side himself. Like I remember a lot of dives, especially at like play-ins in 2021 spring, where there was just him setting up the dive himself on TF.
It is kind of curious because when I think about this Mad KOI style, I usually think about the come to me concept, right? Like they like to have prios so they can like stay in river, and it's the other team who needs to face check continuously, right? And they are pretty good with this kind of picks. Like I'm thinking on Renata on Alvaro, picks like Zaya with Supa, a lot of things that can like kite you back, like you know what I mean, like with pretty good counter engage. So when I think about this style, I think about LNG last year.
Okay.
That they played a lot of folks. So it is kind of curious.
I will take your word on that, by the way, because I don't watch LPL at all.
But yeah, it reminds me like this style of we are the first on river and we force fights in our terms. So it is kind of curious how I see in Mad KOI's case, how they are absorbing a lot of LPL style more than LCK, which is a style like more...
I would agree there.
Are you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I also think we view LPL and LCK a little bit differently. Like when I think of like an LPL style that fits Mad KOI, I think of like RNG back when they had their double solo lane setup. They did have Uzi, and I can't remember who both the solo laners' names were, I'm sorry. But I do remember they would run stuff like Galio Shen, right? Or they would run like Corki counter into that, right? Stuff like this to just elongate the 1-3-1 as long as humanly possible. Because for me, that was the defining characteristic of a Melzet team, was they played all three lanes the whole time. And I do agree with you, it forced fights on their terms by doing so, but the key core thing was these guys would extend the laning phase for as long as humanly possible. And sometimes that did have disastrous results. I actually think it's the reason why they struggle so much in 5v5s. Because if you're doing this kind of a style in a scrim, you're unlikely to get to the 5v5 stage because the enemy team is very likely to cancel the scrim when the game is over. So this can lead to stuff like Movistar Riders versus Unicorns of Love, that 5-game series. Do you remember that? I think it was like game 1 or game 2. They were running a really strong 1-3-1. They got right up to the tier 3s. They were something like 21-7 ahead of their opponents, and they just lost every grouped fight because eventually, at some point, it's very difficult to avoid the straight 5-on-5, and so they lost outright there.
1-3-1 is not like a big thing right now, right? Since the soul changes and all that stuff. In 2021, I think that was where they put the souls in the game. So how you think that is this team evolving that one kinda 1-3-1, but not actual 1-3-1? I don't know if you know what I mean.
But that's interesting though, right? Because like G2, the most dominant team in the LEC, is a 1-3-1 team. They play they play 3-lane setup. Sorry, as long as they possibly can. We saw that today. They just did that against MDK. Something I like about MDK v G2 matchups. This is the only time MDK get challenged on it. I actually have a tweet about this where I said that G2 Arctic's playstyle will be better in the LEC than it is in the ERLs, because playing this kind of slow, not really slow, but playing this wide map state is so alien for a lot of the LEC teams that they would be able to cheat a lot of the harder decisions by doing so, and it would surprise a lot of people. Only G2 really do this. But it's interesting you bring up 2021, because when G2 started doing badly, it was because Souls got introduced in the game.
Yeah.
Because they used to be that team Origin that was really high on Drake prio, and G2 would just trade every Drake for map tempo because they want to play the wide map, right? But when we got to the point where Souls were a thing, suddenly you have the first iteration of Mad, the one with Shadow, winning, because the first Shadow Mad Lions games, they were, the only thing they did was they just grouped on Drake. Like, this was a really early team, right? So they didn't have much map knowledge. They just ran to Drake as a grouping, didn't really fix all the waves for it, tried to force a team fight there, and eventually they figured it out, right? They have this one thing, they expanded to more macro tips, they suddenly got really good about playing around Drake. G2 never contested that on that, so these guys just got Souls all the time. They were in a really good position to threaten G2 where G2 was strong, because Souls kept, that's how they got the upset BO5 against them.
And I don't know if you're agreed with me, but it also explains a little bit about how NA is seemingly, or is like kind of more strong every year, because what they do is go Drake, fight Drake. They don't do almost anything else. Like their macro is not like great rotations. They only set up one side of the map usually, and it is kind of the strength of NA. And well, we saw Energy winning G2 last year, right? So you think that maybe that explains how EU is, like, they work pretty hard. It remembers me a bit how when Riot delete the. I don't remember how was the item, the ward thing in junglers, how Korea was pretty punished by that with less vision, and it kind of seems the same. It's kind of the same for you, right? Like they had a pretty, like, a unique style that was pretty strong, but then Riot decides that it will never be a thing again.
So for me, I'm trying to find the tweet and I can't find it now, but last year, halfway through the year, when you saw a lot of NA org changes happen, where they dumped a lot of their more veteran lineups and they started going into more rookie lineups like the EG one or even the NRG one, I actually tweeted, watch this be the year where NA actually does something the nanosecond that they can't afford to compete for us in imports anymore. And that ended up being the case, because I think if you want new macro concepts, you do need to look to newer players. And this one's counter to what a lot of people think. They somehow think that the older, more experienced players will also somehow be bringing in newer macro concepts in an evolving game, and that's just never been the case. You need teams like MDK or NRG or EG to test the waters and force everyone to get better, which was MDK's function back in G2 Arctic. That was the best thing that they did for the league. The whole league had to catch up to them, even if they didn't really win it, until like 2023 spring, I think, was the only time the Melzet lineup ever won Superliga. Like, for me, the thing about them was always, because they played like a really wide map, their early game scenarios were so good, and the whole league had to fight them on that. They all had to adapt their early games.
Why you think that people were like not that they didn't expect about what Melzet will do in LEC, you know? So why do you think that happened and they didn't expect anything like that?
There's a twofold problem there, right? So the first one is whenever I talk with anyone about Melzet, it's because I've brought the guy up. Because no one, this is the second problem, no one is really watching the ERLs obsessively. And for me, initially watching D2 Arctic, looking at the coach, that was instinctive for me, because I do recognize a lot of that early I like to call it jungle-centric style. There are two ways you can go over jungle-centric style.
Yeah.
And they went the objective timer route with a distinct priority on playing for tempo, then Herald, then Drake in that priority. If they could play for tempo on this side, they do that. So if they went for like a dive, they do that and reset. Or if they don't play for the dive because the enemy's covering, well, now you get Herald. And if they don't do that, then, only then do they do Drake. Maybe they would defend Drake if they know the enemy can't get Herald, but blah, blah, blah. But all of this stuff, all this kind of timing-based stuff for me is like, that is someone in there saying, we're looking at this objectively in the scrim and stuff, because I used to do that too. I really love jungle centricity in the early game. So for me, it's like, this pretty much has to be it. And then the more changes were made to the lineup, not the super fresco-y part, but FES for Alvaro. A big one was Coldo for Alex, because Alex played very differently before joining the team. As these changes happened, but that early game system remained, I was much more confident to say it is a Melzet system. And my stream actually had a meme for it. We ended up calling it like a Melzet's Jungle Academy, right? There was a class of Melzet jungler, because no matter how they played beforehand, Isma, Alex, all of them, they played the exact same when they ran through Melzet's jungle system.
I don't know if you know it, but El Joyas, when he was in Riders and Melzet in G2 Arctic, right?
Yes,
he said,
gave Spanish interviews.
Yeah,
said.
He said that for him, for El Joya, was Melzet who should be like the coach of the split, because they talked a lot, even if they were rivals, right? And even after he joined Mad Lions and all that stuff, El Joya was well, he talked a lot about Melzet and how he loves his style and all that kind of stuff. So did you show in El Joya like this Melzet style even before he was with him?
Yeah, so I actually talked a lot on stream about it. I had translated Spanish articles because I'm friends with Fernando and Noah. So I was fully aware that El Yoya was literally citing Melzet as being his true coach. And I was trying to point this out to the English-speaking community, because it's pretty much only Spanish articles where you could find it.
Yeah. That's why I asked you about if you knew it, because I know that it is pretty like only Spanish people know it, and I would like to see people out of Spain knowing about that, because I think that Melzet El Joya love story is like a story that should be talked everywhere in Europe.
I've tweeted about it in the past, but like Melzet just ultimately doesn't have English connections, so people are unlikely to like team Melzet in the English-speaking community. Whereas the coach that they actually had at the time, somehow, even though I've actually had hot pot with this guy, his name is actually Mac, does have like really good connections, right? So obviously there's an incentive for people to defend him. Not saying he should be attacked over this or something like this, but you're going to hear a lot of good talk about Mac. You're not going to hear a lot of good talk about Melzet. On the idea of like El Yoya's style, El Yoya, Razork, Yike are definitely full map junglers who had a strong degree of control over that portion of the game. So I would imagine, also, I'm gonna be real. I would imagine any conversation of Melzet and a jungler, the jungler's gonna like Melzet. Not necessarily because Melzet knows a lot about jungle, but because his style is so jungle-centric, and what jungler doesn't want that to be their priority, right? Like, what jungler doesn't want that? I think Europe's being nuked a lot because laners have so much control over lineups in general, because there are 4 laners, there's 1 jungler. The laner's more likely to be your how do you put it, your franchise player. And the laner doesn't really get jungle. He doesn't get why, we can do a fix here, but we're playing for this timing now, blah, blah, blah. They'd all rather be played for. Everyone is at least selfish on some kind of level there. And so when problems inevitably arise, a lot of the time it will be the jungler. Selfmade was a victim of this. Tinks was a victim of this. There have been plenty of great junglers in Europe that were victims of this. Melzet's a breath of fresh air for any jungler there because of how he views jungle centricity. So we have a very lucky situation with Mad Lions Koi, their franchise player has been El Yoya that whole time, right? And that does happen to be one of the most important roles in the game. And so I do wonder how much this is calculated by Melzet, right? Because he did get in with El Yoya, but it was also quite clear El Yoya was going to be that guy for Mad for a while. And so I do wonder how much of this was like a really solid career move by him as well, because he held off. He could have moved up a lot, but he knew he had this.
Every time that I talk with Melzet, he's like pretty focused on tempo and position. Like for him, everything is tempo and position, and that's why I think that that kind of counter engage team fight is the team fighting system that works better for them, because it's like more you have the position, and that kind of comes abuse a lot of that advantage.
And I focus on the team fighting aspect there, because I actually think they've only found like one system of team fighting that's worked for them.
Tell me.
Which is the Karma Senna kiteback compositions that they had in winter.
Okay.
And all they did there was they played really, really slow in a front to back kind of team fight style. And just kited them back, kited them back, and split. And eventually one of them would be split, and only then did they commit to an all-in, when it wasn't really a 5v5 anymore. That worked out really well for them, particularly against Fnatic, and they got these 2 picks uncontested for a while. But when they moved back to compositions that needed better all-in timings, they fell back into the same position again. Like they aren't strong team fighters. That's always being the big defining Achilles heel.
What they'll criticize more about the league is it seems like people is not working. They are just playing a video game, but they are not like someone who's doing a sport, right? At the maximum level. Yeah. Like usually when we talk, like an NBA player, for example, they try hard a lot, they work a lot, so and they expect to see that in LEC, and then what they saw is people just playing a video game for fun instead of trying to improve constantly and trying to win worlds, which is a thing that also a lot of people criticize about Mad Lions Koi, that what they want is to win worlds. That's their objective.
But I don't think that's enough as an objective, by the way. I don't think that's the core difference between MDK and the other teams. Like, how long have you been covering the scene, actually?
I mean, I'm working in this scene like from this year, but I started to see like League of Legends at season 7, I think.
Season 7.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was season 7 was Misfits going to Worlds, right?
Yeah,
the Hans Sama Misfits with Alfari and stuff. So that was the rookie team that came up in season 7. Season 8. What was the rookie team that came up in season 8? I remember the rookie team in season 3 was the Nuke Duck Lemon Dogs lineup. The SK lineup that came up in season 5, it was the H2K lineup that came straight from Challenger Series all the way to Worlds. The one with you remember it. It swapped out Febiven for Ryu, but the rest of the lineup was the exact same. In season 6, it was Splice, right? Straight from Challenger Series all the way up. The only addition being that they moved Mickey X into the support role, who was also a rookie at the time. And season 7, it was Misfits. Season 8, it was the Vitality lineup, which was the Giants.
The Giants,
lineup, But with top swapped for Cabo Shard. But otherwise, it was a full. We had full rookie lineups go to Worlds every year, every single year. Literally, there wasn't a single year where a rookie lineup did not go to Worlds before franchising came in. So this whole idea of like stagnation, that has always been the case, and the rookies have always been the bulwark against it. And then when we stopped the promotion tournament and we stopped the ability to bring in the full rookie lineups that had been developing for at least a year in the promotion tournament and continuing the development afterwards, we lost this. This was the biggest problem that we had as a system of development. Every year, literally every single year without fail, we had a rookie lineup going up, and they did well, by the way. They all did at least some kind of damage at the World Championships at that point. But to go to your original question, the thing I actually think mattered for each of these rookie teams is that they had a system of development that was coming up from the ERLs. So it's not enough to say, I want to win Worlds this year, and that keeps me going. That won't keep you going when this week you have to play K-Corp and BDS and Fnatic. That's not going to motivate you that week. What's going to motivate you that week is you guys are trying to get this concept down of getting this 715 wave reset on bot into a Herald shift, right? if you're last year. Now Herald timings are different. Now I guess it would be like we're trying to set up a 4-minute slow push on top side for Herald, right? We're trying to make sure we get this going in scrims. Those systems of development are what will keep you going in that week because there's a clear objective you're playing for now. The motivation factor of learning the game is what I think really matters for a team like MDK and matters for all those rookie lineups in the past.